Hold on to your butt.
Da-da-da. You were saying?
Welcome to episode 162 of the Civil War Breakfast Club podcast. Tonight, as always, I am joined by Darren, the most awesome Civil War nerd I know, and Super Mario Brothers fans will get this reference. I'm just a trampled mushroom named Mary.
I'm sorry, I had to wake up there for a second. How you doing, Mary? How are you? That is a fantastic intro. It's always good to be back and hear the wisdom coming out of your intros.
Well, I just figured since we're talking about a guy named Luigi tonight, I would make a Super Mario Brothers reference because that's a video game I played a lot as a kid.
I'm sure you did. What's going on, Mary? What's going on this cold, freezing Friday night here in Pennsylvania?
Oh yes, we've had a very frigid week here in Pennsylvania after the snowstorm that came through last weekend, and everything is still frozen over. But warmer times await us. As of Monday, we will be up to 30 degrees.
Oh, the heat is on.
And what are you drinking? And how are you?
What a surprise. First of all, thanks for asking. I know you don't really care, but that's fine. I'm drinking Yingling today because that's the beer I have. And I'm drinking out of my 6-time world champion Patriots coffee mug, which with any luck, I'll be having to upgrade this here pretty soon. But that's what I'm doing. So what about yourself?
I am drinking Lakeshore Fog, which is by Southern Tier Brewing Company out of New York, which actually ties into the person we're going to be talking about today since they immigrated to New York State when they came over from Italy. And I'm drinking it out of my Mill Springs Battlefield mug, which has nothing to do with today's episode. It's just favorite mug of mine.
There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. So anyway, Mary, tonight we're going to talk about a guy who is definitely on the obscure side when it comes to Civil War officers. And the man we're going to talk about lived many lives, including a musician, a teacher, a Civil War Medal of Honor recipient, a U.S. consul, an archaeologist, a museum director, and that is the Italian stallion, Luigi Palma di Cesnola.
I would argue that he's not an archaeologist, but anyway, as someone, I would argue he's not an archieologist, but.
Well, we'll talk about that.
That's besides the point.
Cesnola was a man who was his greatest advocate for himself. He was also his worst enemy, and he had that energetic personality which led to arrogance, which haunted him throughout his life. And as we go through it, it shows itself regularly. Now, if you're one of those people who loves to criticize us for mispronouncing words, and I know you are on social media, this is your episode because this is going to be a tough one.
Yes, it will be a tough one for you. And one thing I do want to say about Luigi Palma di Cesnola, the guy we're going to be talking about him being arrogant, I do wonder if it's because, so he is the second son of a count and countess. He's born July 29th, 1832, in the Kingdom of Sardinia in Italy. And because he is a second son, he had to make his own way in the world. So his older brother gets the title of count, but he does not. And I sometimes wonder if that factors into this arrogance he has throughout his life and this kind of like, well, I've been wronged, because I wonder if he felt that he was wronged out of not becoming the count when his older brother was the count.
Possibly. I mean, Luigi Palma di Cesnola, he was born on either June 28th, 1832 or July 23rd, 1832.
Or July 29th.
In Riverola Canavese, that hill town on the Italian Piedmont. But like you said, he is the second son born to a count in the Kingdom of Sardinia. His name was Maurice Palma di Cesnola, and his mother was Mary Isabella Palma di Cesnola. He had a couple of brothers, Flaminio, Alessandro, and Ilario. And because, like you said, he was the second oldest son, he got no title. Now, the Cesnolas, they're well off, but they were basically B-level elite in the region.
Isn't that what counts are? Like, aren't they kind of like the B-levels?
Well, except for Count Chocula.
Or Count von Dracula?
Well, I don't know about that. But they're considered a kind of minor noble Piedmont family. And the thing about it, though, if Luigi was the oldest son born to a more prestigious family, he would have been made a cardinal by the Pope. And his history might have been completely different. Pope Gregory XVI, who was born Bartolomeo Alberto Capillari, he was the Pope who was born in 1832, who wrote that famous Mirari Vaz letter, which is Latin for that you wonder. And, if you remember from your Sunday school days, Mary, which of course you don't, this letter focused on the need of reform in society, and it warned of the danger of the rise of democracy and religion and society. So it shows kind of how that concept of democracy was seeping into all aspects of European life because of the United States, and how monarchs and popes feared it. From Luigi's earliest days, he was always an adventurer. He was kicked out of his first school, a Jesuit school at 15. I went to a Jesuit school. I know what that's like. He gets kicked out at age 15. It was urged by his uncle, Luigi Palma, who was an Italian patriot who supported the Italian Republic to serve in the First Italian War of Independence in 1848. Now, basically, King Charles Albert, he was the Kingdom of Sardinia. He was fighting the Austrian Empire in northern Italy, and it didn't end too well for the Sardinians. Spoiler alert, but on March 23rd of 1849, Luigi will be promoted to the second lieutenant at the Battle of Novara, which was the bloodiest battle in the Italian War. In their independence, it was a decisive victory for the Austrians. Now, 2 years later, Cesnola was sent to the Royal Military Academy in Cherasco, and he was already a professionally trained soldier. But he was living his best life. I mean, he was adored by his classmates, his friends, his family. Now, quote, living his best life is what got him into trouble and kicked out of the Army of Savoy. Mm-hmm. And no one really knows why, but it appears it was either due to some sort of financial issue, or more likely, Cesnola had an illicit affair with someone he was caught.
Like some things in his life, especially later in his life, the details are shady.
They are. But this will not be the first time his arrogance would come back and haunt him, and that's going to lead to his personal embarrassment. In 1855, Cesnola requested and was given a commission with the British Army in the Crimean War, where he was to get his first experience dealing with the Ottoman Empire, which he'll deal with later in life. There he's going to serve as an aide-de-camp to General Enrico Fardella, who's a fellow Italian from Trapani who was also fighting for the British. I know what you're thinking. Is Fardella the same guy who commanded the 101st New York in the Civil War, in the 7 Days battles? And yes, he was, Mary. Good guess on your part.
Another interesting thing about being in the Crimea is this is also where General McClellan is, and he is an observer during this time, and he actually takes a lot back with him to the United States. But what's interesting about this is de Cesnola is going to be a supporter of McClellan throughout his time in the Civil War, and it's very interesting they're there at the same time.
They had very different philosophies about freedom and rights, and we'll get to that. But sometime around 1858, Cesnola is going to leave Europe, and he's going to come back to New York, or he's going to come to New York for the first time, literally only with the clothes on his back and his flute. Now, around this time, Cesnola is going to meet a guy who would be instrumental for the rest of his life. His name was Hiram Henry Hancock, and he ran the Fifth Avenue Hotel in New York City. Hancock would go on to become a representative of the New Hampshire State Legislature. He'll be the president of Dartmouth College down the road. We'll hear about that later. But finding it difficult for an immigrant to work in New York, he, like many people, he began to give music lessons as well as teaching Italian and French to the locals. One of his students was a woman named Mary Isabel Jennings Reed. Mary was the daughter of a U.S. Navy commander, Samuel Chester Reed, who served on the USS Constellation in the War of 1812 and served under privateer George Armstrong at the Battle of Fayal in the Azores. This is the battle that attacked the British ships that were on their way to New Orleans from Jamaica and really helped, according to Andrew Jackson, help defend New Orleans. That's debated, but that's what it was. But Luigi and Mary fell for each other, and they got married in June of 1861. Very much against the wishes of Mary's war hero father, who wanted no part of his daughter marrying a poor Italian immigrant. Now, it is very unlikely, but in an Italian wedding, that Mary's father toasted Por Satani or Viva Gil Spassi, or joined the dance of La Tarantella at the wedding. But I digress, PTSD, okay? Now, Cesnola decided to make the best use of his military knowledge to make money. And at the urging of his wife, Mary, he set up a private military school which helped train 700 future Union officers. Mm-hmm. Now, like you were saying...
700 future Union officers?
Yeah.
Really?
That's what it says.
Wow.
No reason to take that belief because nothing he said is not true. but he promoted... The thing about, like you said a bit ago with McClellan... Cesnola, he very much promoted human rights and universal freedom, which put him on par to eventually, or destiny anyway, to become part of Lincoln's army. It just definitely was. So when the American Civil War broke out 2 months prior in April, the regiments were already being formed in New York City. Now, Cesnola, he needs a job with military experience and his knowledge. He's going to quickly sign up with the 11th New York Cavalry, and he's going to drop Luigi, and he's going to start listing his name as Lewis.
Yeah.
Just because he's
what's it
afraid
called?
of it.
Anglicizing your name?
I don't know what it is. He's losing his Luigi, whatever he is, But Cesnola's going to preach, he preaches aggressive action, which will be necessary if he's going to want to have success in cavalry against the likes of Jeb Stuart and Wade Hampton and all these guys.
Well, they're going, keep in mind too that, at the beginning of the Civil War, and we've talked about this a few times, so the Southerners definitely have the advantage with the cavalry, but you have to remember with that is their society. These are guys that have grown up on horses, like someone like John Brown Gordon, who he ends up joining the infantry because he was rejected from the cavalry because they already had enough people. They've grown up on horses. Jeb Stuart's grown up on horses. They all have. Wade Hampton, all of them. So they are definitely at a disadvantage. The Union is when the Civil War first breaks out.
Absolutely. Now, by the end of 1861, though, Cesnola's leadership and military skills are definitely being noticed. He'll be named colonel of the 4th New York Cavalry and going to serve in Virginia. An officer in Cesnola's 4th New York Cavalry described the regiment as a peculiar polyglot regiment, which means multilingual.
Yeah.
Okay, there. So he had a very diverse type of group. His star is going to start to rise within the Union Army, but as it does, his arrogance also rises and reemerges. And again, this is going to be a repeating thing that's going to go out through the rest of his entire military career. Today, people would say he has a superiority complex.
Yep.
Because he was openly jealous against anyone who was promoted,
Yep.
especially those if he felt that they were inferior to him. He had a hot Italian temper, which regularly caused crises in his camp with his men. He probably lost his mind whenever he got pancakes without vanilla. I mean, you could, that typical Italian, right? His feelings over superiority, though, did give him a benefit of confidence, though it did help him in battle because he was very full of himself. He will work under the direction of his division commander, one Brigadier General Alfred Dufy.
Also an immigrant from Europe.
He's a Parisian Frenchman who also fought in Crimea with the French cavalry. But before long, Cesnola is going to be given a 5-regiment brigade totaling 5,000 men under the command of General Carl Schurz, of all people. And under his direction, his troopers are going to be extremely well trained, very professional. He did a very, very good job preparing his men. But again, unfortunately for Cesnola, trouble is going to find him again. During a weapons inventory session, it was discovered that 5 pistols were missing, and Cesnola was accused of stealing them and selling them for personal profit. For this, he got demoted back to command of his 4th New York Cavalry, and he was passed over for permanent brigade command. Again, despite all of his experience and knowledge. It was discovered later that these pistols had not been stolen, and they were just misplaced. But the damage was done, and Cesnola was knocked back to regimental command due to either a clerical error or, my guess, was for personal bias.
Yeah, and he's not happy about it too. He wrote to his congressman, "With what aching heart I return to my regiment, few persons can appreciate it. I tried ever to my utmost and well deserving from my adoptive country, and the rewards I received from the administration, I may say, butt kicks. I am going to the regiment with a broken heart to stay there some weeks, and then I shall resign as it is incompatible with my character to continue." Well, De Cesnola does not resign. He's going to remain with the 4th New York.
No, he's not. And he's going to keep fighting. March 17th, 1863, Cesnola's New Yorkers are going to find themselves at Kelly's Ford in Culpeper County, Virginia, in a small St. Patrick's Day little battle versus Jeb Stuart and Fitzhugh Lee. Now, it's a small battle, and there's only about 3,000 guys engaged, but it was significant because despite the fact that the Union cavalry had almost 3 times as many men, it was the first time the Rebs had been forced to retreat in the face of a Union cavalry charge, which of course included Cesnola's 4th New York. And as you go through the war, like you said a little while ago, the Confederate cavalry was so far ahead of the Union.
Yeah.
And during the Gettysburg campaign especially, but in 1863, you saw it starting to balance off a little bit.
Yeah.
And this was kind of the first hint that maybe the Northern horsemen could hold their own against the iron. And that's what Kelly's Ford basically was. Cesnola's going to get another chance at commanding a brigade over 20,000 men, believe it or not, prior to the largest cavalry battle of the war, at the Battle of Brandy Station on June 9th of 1863. Now, this is right in the middle of the Gettysburg Campaign. This was that famous battle fought over 9 square miles, over rivers, hills, train tracks, farms.
There was clowns.
There was several clowns, I imagine. But at Brandy Station, Cesnola's brigade charged 2 rebel cavalry units at Hansborough Ridge, and it's going to cause them to fall back. And it's reported that Cesnola himself was up front with his men, quote, clanking his saber with rebel horsemen. So he's right up there. What does that say?
The guy I will say this about de Cesnola. He is a hard fighting guy, and I'm sure that inspired his men to fight just as hard alongside him. And that's the type of person that I think you needed.
Yeah, he was not the type who was going to lead from the back. He's going to be in front all the time. But again, I don't know if it's Napoleon complex or whatever the deal is. He just felt that he was better than everybody. He already had that inflated ego and was brimming with confidence during the Gettysburg Campaign as again it starts to move towards Pennsylvania. Robert Lee's army in Northern Virginia was on the move, as everybody knows, being screened by those Blue Ridge Mountains, and Abraham Lincoln desperately needed to know where they were and where they were going. So he'll order the cavalry to go find them. In pursuit of Lee was the Union cavalry commander by Brigadier General Judson Kilpatrick's brigade, who was the lead brigade in General David McMurtry Gregg's division, under the overall cavalry commander and punchable face, Alfred Pleasanton.
Oh, I had that too.
Absolutely. But about 200 miles south of Gettysburg is the town of Aldie, Virginia. And it's in Loudoun County between Chantilly and Middleburg along modern-day Route 50, which I still think is John Mosby Highway. I don't think they've changed that, but I still think it's John Mosby Highway. But in June of 1863, Aldie will be a small town of about 200 people, which about half the population were slaves. On June 17th, General Pleasanton, he's going to order Gregg's division down Little River Turnpike towards Aldie, which intersected at both the Ashby's Gap Turnpike as well as Snickers Gap Turnpike. Both of these roads are going to lead to their respective gaps, Ashby's Gap and Snickers Gap, and it's going to go into the Shenandoah Valley. And again, that's the whole game. That's where Lee basically is basically trying to go and where the Union is trying to find him. It was important to control these gaps to get into the valley and find out where Lee was and where he was going. But just before all this went down, though, like we said about Bob Dylan, times they were a-changing in the Union cavalry. And this is, again, where things are going to kind of play negatively towards Cesnola. Behind the scenes, Alfred Defeat was demoted and replaced by David McMurtry Gregg. So this move into Aldie is going to be completed by Run DMG. This is going to be his first mission as division commander. The trickle-down effect is going to catch up with Cesnola, because here's why. One of Gregg's first decisions as division commander was to promote his cousin, Colonel John Irvin Gregg, to brigade command. And guess who he took over and who got demoted again with this decision?
De Cesnola.
Cesnola.
But De Cesnola had already been placed under arrest by Pleasanton on June 9th. For riding through the camp or something like that. Like, he'd gotten in trouble with Pleasanton.
Right. He'd been in trouble. There's no doubt about it. But when Cesnola was told he was no longer in command of the brigade in favor of John Irving Gregg, his Italian temper got the best of him again. Cesnola lost his mind and confronted his new division commander, Gregg, and expressed his opinion loudly and very colorfully, as bad as if someone put pineapple on his pizza. I mean, that's how mad he was. Gregg reacted, of course, by putting Cesnola under arrest and made him turn over his sword and pistol and kept him in the back away from the rest of his men. Now, again, this is right before a battle here that's going on. What's going on the Confederate side? On June 17th, rebel cavalry under Thomas Munford, the man who got banana hammocked by William Franklin at Crampton's Gap at South Mountain, by the way, he was ordered to cross into Loudoun County to Aldie to search for supplies. Munford is going to take his 2nd and 3rd Virginia Cavalry, and he will set up a defensive picket line at Aldie, and he's going to take the rest of his regiments. This is the 1st, the 4th, and the 5th Virginia, and they'll set up a camp at a place called, at a farm owned by Franklin Carter, a local in the area. This is northwest of Snickers Gap, and then he's going to move towards the town of Dover's Mills, just west of Aldie. So at 2 o'clock in the afternoon that day, Greg's cavalry, this is going to be the 2nd New York, the 6th Ohio, the 1st Maine, the 1st Rhode Island, and the 1st Massachusetts, as well as the arrested Cesnola's 4th New York, they're going to arrive at Aldie. So you can see where this one's going, right?
Yeah.
As the Rebs move east towards Aldie, they're going to bump into the 1st Massachusetts, I assume at the Dunkin' Donuts, and the Battle of Aldie is going to get underway. Now, we're not going to go into the details of the Battle of Aldie.
Is this where we nearly got hit by the cars?
Yes,
Okay.
right? We did a whole episode on this previously, but I mean, just to,
Where the battlefield is, it's very like it's on like this windy road, and you have to watch out for cars. And there's really cool monuments there. But when we were there with our friend John, who gave an amazing tour of the area, we had to keep watching out for cars. So if you go there, just be careful.
Okay, yeah. But anyway, going back to 1863, pre-cars, I mean, the day of the battle, it was one of those sweltering 95-degree days, one of those brutal, hot Virginia days where you could really use a white wine. And the battle was an absolute rock fight between 4,000 total men and horses. So we don't got to talk about the details, but we want to talk about how this affects Cesnola's role in the battle. Now, he's arrested now. Old friend Thomas Rosser, we just talked about him.
Yes.
And the 5th Virginia Cavalry, they're going to be at the William Adam farmhouse, and he's going to deploy his men west on a ridgeline on a road leading out of Aldie, and he's going to wait for the Federal cavalry basically to come get him. It was the 1st Massachusetts again, that cavalry, who attacked after they saw Rosser's movements, and he assumed that he was falling back, but they weren't. Joining the 1st Mass was Cesnola's 4th New York. Again, he is not with them. He is under arrest, and he's in timeout, so they're going to make the charge without their leader. Rosser's men, they're going to countercharge, and they're going to drive both the Mass and New York men back, and they're both going to get routed. Cesnola, though, he witnesses the whole thing, and he had enough. He just had enough. Without orders and still under arrest, Cesnola's going to jump on his horse. He's going to ride to his men, and he's going to take over, leading them on the second charge. Now, the story is Judson Kilpatrick saw this all go down, and he went over to Dave McMurtry, Greg's head, to Pleasanton, and he got Cesnola unarrested, got him released from his prison just before the 4th New York's 3rd charge at Rosser's Virginians. Cesnola didn't have a sword, so another general, who I think was probably Kilpatrick, gave him his to use in the charge, and he told him, quote, "Bring it back with some rebel blood on it."
I thought you were going to say, bring it on.
Bring it on. An embedded New York Times reporter wrote of Cesnola's charge, and he said, quote, "By a gallant charge, Cesnola turned apparent defeat into a glorious victory for our arms, completely routing the enemy and cutting off 100 men, all of whom were captured." Now, unfortunately for Cesnola, this 3rd charge, which some people think was actually their 5th charge, but it doesn't matter, this is going to be his last. According to Elizabeth McFadden in her book, The Glitter and the Gold, which is a biography about Cesnola, quote, "The colonel ends up laying under his dead horse, a saber cut 3 inches long on the crown of his head, a large cut on the palm of his hand, and a gunshot wound in the upper part of his left arm." For his efforts at Aldie, Luigi Palma di Cesnola will become the first Italian to receive the Medal of Honor.
And what was said about that was this. He was present in arrest when, seeing his regiment fall back, he rallied his men, accompanied them without arms in a second charge, and in recognition of his gallantry was released from arrest. He continued in the action at the head of his regiment until he was desperately wounded and taken prisoner.
So that's what it was. Now, Cesnola, he read those attacks, all those injuries he had. He will survive, but he'll be captured by the rebels, and he's going to be sent to Libby Prison in Richmond, arriving on June 25th, 1863. He'll stay there until March 24th of 64. Now, Libby Prison, everybody knows Libby, after Andersonville, is probably the most famous Confederate prison during the American Civil War. It is named for a guy named Luther Libby, who owned the 3-story building as part of a tobacco factory and a store in 1854. It was converted into a prison in 1862 and would house only Union officers. So theoretically, it was kind of the rebels' version of Fort Warren in Boston Harbor.
Yeah.
But it was a little more harsh. It was under the command of a guy named Major Thomas Pratt Turner. Now, By the winter of 1863, Libby Prison had about 1,000 prisoners, including Battle of Gettysburg participant, our friend Charles Tilden from the 16th Maine was a
Who
resident.
manages to break out.
A lot of them do. As he slowly gets nursed back to health, Cesnola is going to write, basically he's going to write 14 different letters to his wife during his incarceration, mostly asking for blankets and food. His letters home to Mary, though, are going to become some of the most insightful letters ever written describing life inside Libby Prison. Some of them were published later in the Sanitary Commission Bulletin, which was to raise money for sick and wounded Northern soldiers, right? He wrote of his arrival, and when this is one of my favorite stories. I've got so many favorite stories, but this is a great letter. He writes of his arrival to Libby, and when a Confederate soldier asked him to empty his pockets and remove his boots as he entered Libby Prison. And this is what he says. This is great. Quote, this is Cesnola. I answered him that I always had a servant to perform the service of removing my boots for me, and I refused to do so until he took them off himself. His next paragraph, this is what he writes. I entered the gates of the Confederate prison, stripped of everything except my spurs, which were screwed into the boots he could not be removed. So what is he saying?
He's naked when he enters?
After he told the Rebs he could take the boots off of them, the guard took everything off except his boots, made him walk into Libby Prison wearing only his boots and his cannoli hanging out.
Oh my God.
He writes later, quote, I remained in this deplorable condition for over 5 months using my boots as a pillow during the night and sleeping on the bare and often damp floor with neither blanket nor overcoat or any other covering. So he had a tough beginning.
Is he naked the entire time?
Not the whole time, but he walked in.
Like, is he like, what's that show, Naked and Afraid? Naked and Afraid in Libby Prison?
But according to his letter, the Reb took everything off except his boots and made him walk in naked, which I think is fantastic. And that whoever that Reb is gets a high five. That's hilarious, right? But he's going to describe the food or lack thereof, and because he's, most of what he's talking about is the stuff that he wants for the most part. He writes, quote, from June to September, we had a ration the half of an ordinary sized loaf of wheat bread. The beans were the poorest kinds, in each of which had a nest of an insect.
Ew.
But hunger had no law. And he writes all his Dear Mary, and he signs them all Luigi. So he's going back to Luigi again, right?
Yeah. Well, I wonder if he stayed that way for her, that maybe she was like, well, you don't have to change your name for me. He's anglicizing it for the rest of the world.
Oh, yeah, probably. But Cesnola did keep his flute, though. Cesnola requested other items such as pens and a copy of flute music from Verdi's Il Trovatore so he could entertain the men with his flute. Okay? Now, mail was sent on what was called the Flag of Truce boat, which arrived every 10 days or so and shuttled mail back and forth so both Union and Confederate prisoners could write to their families. Libby Prison's, their incoming mail was always inspected by someone he called Mr. Higgins, who Cesnola was apparently friendly with, but Mr. Higgins would steal items from time to time. So,
Mr. Higgins.
Right? I could not find his first name, but he refers to him throughout as Mr. Higgins. On October 10th, 1863, Libby Prison had 922 Union officers present. 7 of them were full colonels. Cesnola described he was allowed to shave twice a week at a cost of $2 per shave, and the men had freedom to move around the prison wherever they wanted. Beyond his request to Mary for blankets were edibles. Not the kind of the podcast consigliere Fairfax has, but actual ones, right? He asked for food. Now, here's the fun thing about the Cesnola. This Cesnola also requested that his wife send him women's clothing, including ladies' gaiters, gloves, and copies of Frank Leslie's Gazette of Women's Fashion magazine.
What is happening in Libby Prison?
He writes to Mary, quote, this is a beautiful quote, I hope that although you see 2 pairs of ladies' gaiters on this list, you will not be jealous. I have no sweetheart here.
Is he doing some Priscilla, Queen of the Desert here?
No. What he's doing, and I looked this up, Mr. Higgins was requesting these items so he can give them to his wife. So what happened was he'd send women's clothes. Mr. Higgins would take the women's clothes and not steal anything else out of Cesnola's pack. So he was bribing Mr. Higgins to get his stuff
Mr. Higgins.
by getting stuff for Higgins' wife. Because he really wanted blankets and food. But it's fun to read the discourse, how this whole... You realize these are regular people.
Did you ever find a picture of Mr. Higgins?
No. But that's the deal, is he was kind of the censor. He would take what he wanted out of your mail, and he made a deal because he was friendly with him, saying, how about I'll get your wife some stuff, just leave my food alone, my blankets alone, I'll get you some gloves and some gaiters, those women's boots. Apparently he was okay with it, and that's kind of how it all went down.
Wow.
But what Cesnola really wanted was to get the hell out of Libby, and he wrote letters back to his brother Ilario in Rivarolo, Italy, to help find someone influential who could help get him freed. It didn't take really too long to figure out that the more politically influential friends you had, the faster you got out of there. I mean, he saw prisoners released almost daily.
Well, unless you're Charles Tilden.
Oh, yeah. But he knew that he needed to pull strings to make it happen. He wrote to his friend back in New York, Hiram Henry Hitchcock, asking him for money. He also wrote to his Senator Ira Harris, hoping he would help secure his release. But finally, Cesnola's letters paid off. On March 24th, 1864, Cesnola was exchanged for Colonel William Jackson Brown, who was referred to usually as Jack Brown. Brown was a Georgian who was a very close and personal friend of Confederate President Jefferson Davis, who was captured at the wheat field here in Gettysburg on July 2nd.
There was Georgians at Gettysburg.
There was. He gets captured while leading the first charge of his 59th Georgia. So they arrange it that he's going to get released for Jack Brown. With his exchange finally secured, Cesnola got his release, and he immediately decided he was going to go first to Washington. You know why? To pick up his missing pay, and then he was going to New York City to see Mary and their daughter. They had a daughter at this point. On his way, he's going to stop first in Annapolis, Maryland. He's going to stay with his friend, who has to be Dr. Cyrus Bacon of the 7th Michigan. It has to be, because he writes, quote, "The surgeon who's in charge of the 100 hospitals in Annapolis, where I found a warm bath in white linens." So it was probably Bacon.
Cyrus Bacon.
Right. But he wrote that the convalescent camp in Annapolis for Surgeon William Rullison, that's what it was named for, it was a complete mess. He talked about there were 62 other officers without clothes, many straggling in the streets of Annapolis. So it was a complete mess. After visiting with his family in New York City, Cesnola was going to return to the field in Virginia, and he'll join Phil Sheridan's cavalry now, under one Ulysses S. Grant. Mm-hmm. He'll be back with the 4th New York Cavalry. He'll see action at Cold Harbor and at Trevilian Station, where he was involved in 7 assaults and sustained heavy losses. But guess what gets him again here? His attitude.
Yep.
And his pissy little demeanor. His attitude against authority showed again after Trevilian, and he was extremely critical of the Union command at this battle. He complained not about the heavy losses, but he was very vocal and upset about and very disapproving of seeing many Union troops looting, burning Southern homes, and in several cases mistreating Southern women. And he ran his mouth.
And this was in the Valley.
This is Overland.
Overland campaign. Overland campaign.
It would be right. It'd be Sheridan.
Sheridan in the Valley.
I was thinking U.S. Grant.
Yeah.
But this is all going on, which we talked about that before.
Yeah.
But when September of 1864 rolled around, he was done. His unit was done. After 47 battles, Cesnola, they had enough of him. They sent him home. And now he had to decide how to provide for his family. Not the war was over. Now, I don't think he was kicked out. I think he just mustered out and they said, just go. Because he was a loose cannon. Yeah. He just ran at his mouth. They were sick of dealing with it. Back home in New York, Luigi and Mary were completely broke at this point. But through some connections in New York City, probably Henry Hancock again, he was able to secure a job as a U.S. consul to Cyprus. Mm-hmm. Now, he'll become an American citizen in August of 1865. Cesnola's going to leave for Cyprus. He'll arrive on Christmas Day, where the first thing he does, he meets the Turkish elites who controlled the island. He lies and tells them he was a general in the Civil War because he wants to impress them.
Of course he does.
Because he does. I mean, this guy's unbelievable. But I mean, in his defense, he did receive the title of Brevet Brigadier General.
Yeah. On
March 13th of 65. But the Senate never confirmed it, so it never really happened.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So who knows, right?
Yep.
1865 to 1877, Cesnola was the U.S. consul to Cyprus. And during this time, I have to think he saw his first Indiana Jones movie or something, because he became obsessed with all things archaeology and relic hunting.
Yep. He is going to acquire.
Well, don't jump ahead too far,
no.
though, okay? But just before we get to that,
Yeah.
And because set up this situation, the late 1800s was an era where archaeology was really taking off. The city of Troy was discovered.
Yep, by Heinrich Schliemann.
We'll talk about him. And it was proven that it was a real place, not just a fictional city by the story of Homer, the Greek poet, not the Simpsons character, Mary. But just like that Forrest Gump meme says, and just like that, everyone was an expert in archaeology.
Yes, they were. And I was telling you before we recorded this that, so when I did my undergraduate degree, it was in classical studies and anthropology, specializing in archaeology. And we talked a lot about this period in the 1870s and the 1880s where people were doing quote unquote archaeology. Now, at the time, they thought it was, legal, and the methods they were using were good, but as it turns out, they weren't. So today, men like Heinrich Schliemann aren't as respected as, now he still is because he found Troy, but his methods destroyed some stuff. But D. Cesnola is one of these guys that is not, when it comes to archaeologists of the time, he's not Indiana Jones.
No, he's not. He's going to begin to excavate the land around him in Cyprus. He's going to begin to find thousands of artifacts. And he soon had one of the most impressive collections in the world, over 35,000 pieces. And he set off to prove that Cyprus was the link between Egypt and Greece and antiquity. You had the French and Russian governments making overtures to Cesnola. They wanted to buy his collection for the museums. But then came calling the New York City's Metropolitan Museum of Art, which was opening a museum in Central Park and wanted Cesnola's collection as its centerpiece. Now, Cesnola, he split the collection up and he sent about 30,000 pieces to New York to that museum in 1876. He also sent 6,000 items to Stanford University's Museum of Art in California. And this was in 1884. And 135 pieces he donated to the Archaeological Museum of the American University in Beirut. About 5,000 of these pieces were lost in a shipwreck when a ship named the Naprid sank near Larnaca on its way to Boston from Beirut in 1872. Now, here's kind of a crazy thing. The Naprid was never found. As recently as 2019, 2 men were arrested off Larnaca's coast for trying to locate Cesnola's lost artifacts.
Really?
So they're still out there. Wow. In the 1870s, Cesnola was world famous, and he claimed to have had an audience with King Umberto of Italy. King Umberto I, whose actual name is the incredible Umberto Ranieri Carlo Emanuele Giovanni Maria Ferdinando Eugeni di Savoia, was assassinated in 1900. He was assassinated in 1900 by a guy named Gaetano Bresci, who famously quoted, if you know your assassination history, "I did not kill Umberto, I killed a principal." That's what he said. But anyway, Cesnola is going to receive an honorary degree from Dartmouth College in 1872. Why?
For archaeology.
Because that's where Hiram Hancock was working. He's the president. This is kind of how the whole thing kind of goes with this. Through Cesnola had become a world-famous archaeologist, he was quickly becoming despised and somewhat of a joke within that community. In Cyprus, he was considered a looter.
Yep.
A researcher named Ahmed Gazioglu, he claimed Cesnola excavated illegally, blackmailing anyone who challenged him. He wrote, quote, "He was a problem to the Turkish authorities, both because of his contempt for the law and his misbehavior towards the officials and the people." Vassos Kariorgis, the former director of antiquities of the American Museum in Beirut, wrote of Cesnola, "If one judges Cesnola and his methods by modern precedents, one must condemn him." Now, according to others around Cesnola, and this is incredible, he would take different pieces of statues and put them together to make a complete one, even if they're from different periods.
Oh my God.
They said beauty was his main concern, which was popular at the time. But this is the type of things he did. Part of Cesnola's decision to give so many of his collection to the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York was he insisted on being named to their board of directors, and in 1879 he became its first director, which made him an A-lister in New York City now.
I can only imagine. This is just like, I mean, and I'm a person who, took archaeology when I was in graduate school. I worked in the museum field for a couple of years as a conservator. So to hear that he is like putting a statue together out of different pieces from different eras is just like that today, that is against like,
oh yeah,
like the ethics of what museums and all that does and archaeologists do.
But all the whispers, while this is all going to New York City, all the whispers back in Cyprus of his impropriety fueled his anger, which was driven by his jealousy of others in the field. He probably had that imposter syndrome too,
yeah.
Right? Realistically. He was accused of having no education to become a historian, although he did have a Facebook page and called himself a historian, so I guess that counts.
That tracks. Was he also a content creator?
No. But this type of jealousy, it ate him alive inside. He wanted to be the man, and he kind of knew he wasn't, but he was playing the part, and he was making money. You mentioned Heinrich Schliemann. He was that pioneer in the field of archaeology you mentioned,
yep.
And he's the one who's making discoveries of Troy and Mycenae. Mm-hmm. He was writing scientific reports of his discoveries,
yep.
Which made Cesnola crazy jealous. Cesnola wrote of him, quote, "When I publish my latest discoveries, they will throw forever into shade those of Schliemann." And all the shade towards Cesnola, though, was justified. In 1875, Cesnola claimed to have discovered tombs containing gold and silver at Cerium on the southwestern coast of Cyprus. He used that discovery of gold and silver to help negotiate an inflated price for his collection when he sold it at the museum in New York, Metropolitan,
yeah.
Right? It was later discovered that Cesnola made up the entire story of Curium's excavations, and no tombs ever existed. It turns out he bought the gold and silver from laborers at other digs and even at local bazaars in Cyprus,
yep.
And then told the museum in New York he found in tombs. It's incredible.
It's so just, and I'm, reading this and I'm like, what? And I mean, you can visit today. You can go to the Metropolitan Museum of Art, or the Met if you're nasty, and you can visit the Cesnola collection at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. And they do have some stuff to say about it. Mm-hmm. They say, the story of the Cesnola collection is almost as colorful as that of its creator, Luigi Palma di Cesnola. After a military career in both Europe and the American Civil War, Cesnola was appointed American consul in Cyprus in 1865. During the next few years, he amassed an unrivaled collection of antiquities through extensive excavations and by purchase. The whole enterprise was funded from his own resources. At the time, a number of antiquarians from various European countries were beginning to collect Cypriotic antiquities, but they were soon outmatched by Cesnola, who came to dominate the scene in Cyprus. Cesnola saw his work as rivaling that of Heinrich Schliemann at Troy and intended his discoveries on Cyprus to provide important evidence of the so-called missing link between biblical and classical worlds, which was what you mentioned. Mm-hmm. And they go on to talk about how the final destination of the Cesnola collection was for a long time uncertain, and talks about how he shipped his collection initially to London, where its exhibition aroused considerable public interest. And it was at this time that the newly founded Metropolitan Museum of Art intervened and acquired the bulk of the collection for New York. The purchase was funded by public subscription, with several leading business tycoons making substantial contributions. Cesnola accompanied his collection back to New York and devoted himself to supervising the work on its installation and publication. In 1877, he accepted a place in the museum's board of trustees and served as its first director from 1879 until his death in 1904. And they end their piece on the Cesnola collection by saying that it remains a wonderful storehouse of ancient art and artifact, and it is by far the most important and comprehensive collection of Cypriot material in the Western Hemisphere. The objects illustrate the unique character of Cypriot, I don't know if I'm saying that right, art, and highlight the exotic blend of Greek, Near Eastern, and Egyptian influences in Cyprus throughout antiquity. I have many opinions about this.
Well, he said, take the art, leave the cannoli. That's basically what he did.
Yeah, and it's like, I mean, there's something to be said for that line from Indiana Jones where it's like, this belongs in a museum. Yes, but also, how did you acquire it?
Well, I mean,
as well.
Well, that's the whole thing too. I mean, it goes on to say, and if you look at, you can take a peek at the Metropolitan Museum of Art's website, and the quote says, by far the most important collection of Cypriot materials in the Western Hemisphere. They're very proud of it. They certainly are.
Yeah.
But going back to the 1870s now, back in New York with his new job at the museum, I mean, he was a socialite. His wife Mary got involved. They founded the Italian Orphanage, as well as the Christopher Columbus Hospital in New York. So they did good things for the most part.
They're still doing good things.
But Cesnola did make good on his promise to write about his discoveries to counter Schliemann. When in 1877 he released, quote, Cyprus, its ancient culture, as well as his 3-volume atlas of Cesnola's collection of Cypriot antiquities in 1884. But as he's doing this, he could never shake off his problems, and questions about his legitimacy of a collection followed him everywhere. In 1880, a New York Herald published an article by art critic Clarence Cook, as well as Parisian art dealer Gaston Ferdent, doubting the authenticity of the artifacts, basically calling him a complete fraud. So for the rest of his life, Cesnola is going to enjoy living that life of an elite in New York City, but he's always looking over his shoulder for criticisms and allegations that at any time could come that would send him into a jealous rage. And Cesnola is going to live out the rest of his days. He'll die on November 20th of 1904 in New York City. He's buried in Kensico Cemetery in Valhalla, New York. Now, it's interesting. At his funeral on November 23rd of 1904, he was buried at St. Patrick's Cathedral. That's where his funeral was in Manhattan. He was praised by people like J.P. Morgan, the Vanderbilts. The eulogist described Cesnola as, quote, somewhat restive in opposition and somewhat impetuous in speech and action, but at all times devoted to his duty. And, you know, history is a funny thing because military history judges Cesnola as a smart tactician, a hard fighter, while many in the museum and art community view him as a looting fraud who was an insult to the world of archaeology. But in the end, people like him there's so many people with so many different sides and angles to study. And the one thing that you can definitely say that Luigi Palma di Cesnola, he lived his best life.
He did.
And he did what he could to make the absolute best of every situation, regardless of who it hurt or what people thought of him. And you got to respect it. But he's you want to talk about a guy with a million different angles. I mean, he really is.
He's a fascinating person to study. And just when I read the archaeology stuff, I mean, that piqued my interest because I've been interested in that since I was a kid. And today, Cyprus views the collection as their property. So I would imagine they've probably written to the Met and were like, you need to give this stuff back to us because it's ours and it was taken illegally. Like now it would be defined in terms of like taken illegally and looted.
Yeah, probably, realistically speaking. But I mean, the thing about it, though, is when you look at his life in a panorama, you look at the whole thing, not individual, look at his military or at the 4th New York Cavalry. He was always a guy who was trying to get every angle. He was just pushing the envelope a little bit every single time he could. You look at his Libby prison stories, which his letters are fantastic about Libby.
Mr. Higgins?
Because he's very vivid and talks about it like it sounds like it's a real world episode. The way he talks about it.
I'm wondering if it was like naked and afraid the entire time.
I don't know about that. It might have been. Who knows? You know what I mean? But I mean, he's the type of guy who was always playing the angle to try to find the benefit. He was always looking for the deal. You know what I mean? And he went from coming from a B-level, probably an upper middle class family, to being completely poor, to being crazy rich. And I think he probably did it wondering how he did it, and is the hammer going to fall? Is something going to happen to take it all away? Because I think he knew he got it all kind of fraudulently, but played the game because he wanted to be looked at a certain way. Because when they took away his brigadiers, they busted him down to 4th New York Cavalry again. It was almost like it was an insult to his personality, to his psyche. And he always tried to push it to get back to that level. And whenever he did, he was always looking around to see who am I better than? Who can I try to bring down to my level so they can't trump me and make me feel inferior? And his whole life was literally spent looking over his shoulder, which is kind of sad.
Yeah. Well, and I think it goes back to, what we talked about at the beginning of the episode with him being the second born son, that he is not at all in any way entitled to that being a count. It's his older brother that gets that. He, as a second born, has to make his own way in the world.
Absolutely.
So, and I think a lot of it goes back to that he feels he has to prove himself. And I think that's why he is the way he is. Now, I think he does prove himself. He earns the Medal of Honor at the Battle of Aldie. He's a very hard fighting guy. But as you said, there's so many different angles to him that he's one of these figures in the Civil War that I don't think gets studied enough. But he has such a unique history. Not necessarily during the Civil War is fascinating, but it's afterwards, this archaeological connection that he is part of that archaeological boom that we're seeing with, that Heinrich Schliemann is a part of.
Yeah, no question. And he's just like so many of these people is waiting to be discovered. There's so many fascinating people who don't get studied, who as you study them, just become so fascinating. Yeah. And Cesnola is a type of guy who he's easily relatable,
Yeah.
And we were joking about the cannolis and we're joking about the temper and all that stuff too. But I mean, you have to wonder if at any point he's sitting in that diner waiting for "Don't Stop Believing" to be playing in the background because he was always looking over his shoulder.
Yeah.
There was always something that was coming. There was always the ghost and the shadow was always around from him. And it's because that's what he thought.
And probably too, because he is an immigrant in America and I mean, we saw during the Civil War, like the immigrants they're not looked upon very highly. And that is shown in that he feels the need to anglicize his name to Louis and to drop the Luigi.
But the thing we got to remember though is we've had some fun talk about him with the stories and all stuff, but he did get the Medal of Honor.
Yeah,
and he was the first Italian American to get the Medal of Honor, so he deserved it. His battle at Aldi, basically jumping off the bench when he wasn't in the game to take over, is one of those uniquely American stories, one of those unique Civil War stories that you can't help. We've been to Aldi, we've seen the ground, we know exactly where he did it.
Yep.
You can just imagine going through his mind because this was his chance finally at glory in his mind.
Yeah.
Going against Thomas Rosser and those Virginians, and he did it. And he charged at least 3 times. Some people say 5 times, but he gets captured. He survives. He gets out of Libby. He comes back to fight again. He goes up until the Battle of Trevilian Station, and that's the end of him. But if his story ended there, he would still be a model to be studied in the Civil War community.
Yeah.
But that's just one half of the coin. The rest of his life as an an archaeologist and antiques, it just adds a different flavor to him that makes him so fascinating. He just does.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm really glad we were able to talk about him tonight, and we've been, saying for a while we've been going to do an episode ever since we did the episode on Aldi and never talked about him.
No, yeah, that's true, but that's good. So we'll leave him there. We'll say arrivederci to him there, and we'll move on from that. So what's coming up for us next?
So we are going to be in the coming months. We are going to be doing an episode with our friend Dave Taylor, who is going to be leading some Lincoln assassination tours. We are also going to be revisiting the Battle of Shiloh as well, probably closer to that anniversary in April, doing I think probably a couple episodes about that just because we want to revisit it. It's been a while for us. Go back to talking about that again. We are going to be having our YouTube live stream on this Sunday on February 1st.
Wow.
At 10 o'clock in the morning on our YouTube channel. And I think that's it.
So a lot of good stuff coming. So we'll look forward to that. Look forward to talking with Dave again about the Lincoln John Wilkes Booth Escape Tour that he'll be running, and we'll talk about the history of that. But off we go. So any final words from you, Fitzgerald?
Well, thank you for bringing it like you always do. This was an awesome episode. I'm glad we got to talk archaeology because that is like a subject that's near and dear to my heart.
No, it was a lot of fun. No question about that. So off we go. Everyone, hopefully it warms up wherever you are because it is freezing here. I mean, it's ridiculous. But in any case, it will warm up eventually. February's around the corner. We got a lot of cool stuff coming. So off we go. So everybody have a great, safe weekend. We will talk to you all on the other side.
See y'all later.
Peace out.
Bye.